Welcome to the Rolling Forward podcast,
a platform where we talk about all things logistics.
Leading this discussion, you've got Brett and Nathan.
And together, we share a passion for the logistics industry.
All right, welcome. We're back.
Thanks, Nate. Good to be here.
We're seasoning up these seats and microphones.
Yes.
Awesome. So the topic we want to talk about today is complacency and logistics don't mix.
Yes.
And we're going to start with a recent scenario that made the headlines.
Was really high profile and was very unfortunate.
Yep. And it's an example that we can all be in the firing line, so to speak, at various points in time.
That's right.
We're all in the same boat together in this logistics game.
Yep.
And then we'll give some examples about our company, some things that happen with us, and
but it's the fight. It's the fight we're in, which is the fight against complacency.
Yep.
We do things multiple times, but on the 53rd time, we end up with a different result. And the question is, why do we get a different result? So,
yep.
In the example that happened with the big wind turbine piece on, I guess it was last Friday night.
Yep.
Thursday night, Friday night, whichever it was we'd argue was an example of complacency. They'd done that job heaps of times.
Yep. So let's roll through that. What actually happened, Brett?
Well, unfortunately, a large wind turbine piece going out to a wind project got jammed under a bridge.
Yep.
Okay. So, that for the grace of God, that could be any of us.
Yes.
Carting that piece. We all rely on our employees. We all rely on them to follow procedure and to be present to the job.
Yep.
So we all fight what looks like an issue of complacency.
Yep.
We knew the job. We'd done the job 40 times before.
Yep.
But we end up with this. We feel for Cube. It's just an unfortunate incident, but something we all in the industry fight.
Yep.
And it is frustrating, and it is that complacency that comes with multiple operations of the same thing.
Yep.
We've had it in our business, Nath, where we've had, done it 40 times. The 41st, we have a problem.
Yep.
We have a dropped piece. We have a scratched something. Whatever it is. But it's that complacency and not following procedure that ends up in the problem, and it's something we fight. We all fight.
Yep.
We all fight. So, as you said, we're all on the same bus. We feel for that situation because, all down the line from that very high profile example down to literally, scratching a car.
Yep.
It's exactly the same process. We go through it multiple times. People are trained in it. They know what the various steps are to achieve a successful outcome.
Yep.
But because of complacency, we don't follow procedure.
Yep. And I think, from our perspective, when we have these types of conversations, the thing that comes to mind for us is people just not paying attention.
That's it. Not present. They're just not present. So.
And, we were talking about this as a business yesterday, and one of our team members even referenced to say, he had a driving experience where he'd sort of taken the wrong route, realised it, looked ahead and went, oh, I can't do this. But, the difference is he was present to the situation.
That's right.
Caused a lot of traffic and chaos, but was able to reverse back with support.
And avoid it.
And avoid the situation. I think about, for me, like I haven't been in a car accident beforehand. I don't want to be in a car accident. And I'm very hyper vigilant on the road. And I had a scenario recently where I was test driving a car and I was driving on a road that I'm familiar with. I'm driving along, and then all of a sudden someone who'd pulled over had their indicator on, the left-hand indicator on. They'd pulled over, they were in a bike lane and a park lane. So there's heaps of space. Then all of a sudden in front of me, they just hook the steering wheel and spin. And I don't know
to the
how.
right.
To the right.
With left-hand blinker on. Yeah.
Yep. And I don't know how, but somehow I curved around them in a freaking test vehicle. And I said to the bloke, we're going back to your yard right now and dropping this car off.
Yeah, this car's jinxed.
I'm not. But the difference there that I'm talking about is just that hypervigilance of going, something could happen at any given time.
That's exactly right. And that's what you've got to be when you're in this game, is you've got to do every job, whether it's the 41st or the 101st, as the same as you did the first.
Yep.
You've got to apply that same logic.
Yeah, and it's really unfortunate, this situation here where, our understanding of the situation is the pilot car has taken the road off previously
to do the bypass,
and unfortunately that driver, for whatever reason,
missed it,
has missed it and kept to that speed, and it's happened.
with disastrous results.
Looking at our own nest, as you said, we're on the same boat. We're with Cube in support of this situation. We've been there before ourselves too.
Exactly.
A couple of things that come to mind for me is we had a side loader with a container on top, get wedged underneath a rail bridge.
Yes.
And that didn't make the headlines to the extent that this one did here, but again, it's the same scenario, complacency.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got this horrible...
Not present.
Yeah, and we've got this horrible situation that ultimately impacts the community around.
Yes. And that's right. So the thing that happened just recently with the wind turbine impacted a lot of people. So it was very high profile, but we're all in the same bus, as you say. So there's lots of instances where, on a smaller scale, the same thing happens in logistics if people don't treat the job like the first time they did it. Yeah. That's unfortunately got to be the approach. Otherwise, complacency will become part of the job, and you'll have event number 52, which is done differently to number 51, unfortunately, for a bad outcome.
Yep.
So,
staying on the topic of rail bridges,
low bridges,
and low bridges, oftentimes you can see online or in the headlines, whether it be taut liners or whatnot that are wedged under bridges on the south side, and it seems to be unfortunately common.
No, I thought, trucks, the normal height for a truck is 4.3.
Yep.
So, I'd sort of argue why we got these things open. Indeed, there are examples of crazy low bridges, and road managers have got to take some responsibility here, in addition to the road transport industry, about paying attention, because there's about a bridge strike, I think, every day. It's a ridiculous amount of interactions between commercial freight and bridges.
Yep.
We have an example here in Wynnum where the bridge is less than 2 metres tall.
It's crazy.
So, obviously a truck won't try to get under that because the driver will be looking straight at the bridge.
Yep.
But for car drivers, they're at risk as well. So,
or your passionate forward drivers that love to
have stuff on the roof,
lift their vehicles or have kit on top.
That's it.
Yep.
What do you got? So, my question would be: are we just setting ourselves up for failure with bridges that are under 4.3?
Yep.
And indeed, why are those even open? If we really want to do something about this, that's what a road manager would be seriously thinking about. I'll just close all those bridges because they just create huge strike risk and potential damage for both the rail infrastructure or road infrastructure and the travelling public. So it is a question we've got to ask ourselves: why do we have these bridges set so low?
Yeah, and ultimately
just close them.
We're talking about some very low, what we would argue is low heights right there, but there's also on a lot of our highways a main thoroughfare of carting oversized loads.
That's right.
And it's not easy for haulers. And I come back to thinking when we moved a couple of those giraffes.
Yes.
And driving between Brisbane and the Sunshine Coast, lots of bridges. And they're not all, horizontal. Some are on angles. And it was really interesting.
Some are higher, some are lower, on the same point.
When we're running in the convoy, we had a pilot up front, then the float with the oversized giraffe. Then we had another pilot, then the vet, and then I was driving. And on some of these bridges, we were all on the two-way talking. We had to slow the traffic right down to 20 k's because we were a bit cautious about the heights. And in some cases, veer to the far right-hand side where it was actually higher compared to the left-hand side of the road.
Yes.
And one of the comments the pilot bloke made to me before we ran the route is he said, be mindful that whilst the sign on the bridge indicates the height, they don't always change the signage when they resurface the roads.
As the asphalt grows,
So it's a very good point.
Yep.
Who's paying attention to that per se? As the road manager, how thorough is that actually being monitored?
Yeah. That 5.3 could become 5.1.
Yep.
Pretty quickly.
Yep.
Yeah.
So hence, the last thing we wanted to see was a giraffe on a float making contact with the bridge.
Well, for the giraffe, it would not be good.
No.
So, but that's the other thing about main roads is, having those heights so that 5+ metre loads can go through easily without the risk of a strike, or at least have a sensible diversion path to get around it. So, yeah, the whole concept of carting things that are high need special treatment, but I'd argue the things 4, 3 and less, really, why are they open?
Yep.
You know, unless there's an absolute necessity for it, there's a good argument to close them to avoid these rail strikes, these bridge strikes, and the risk of damage to the infrastructure and trucks.
Yep.
So
so let's wrap things up and talk about a couple of solutions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because we don't always like to just throw negative or objections out. So let's talk about a couple of solutions, really. What do you reckon, Brent?
In terms of solutions,
Yeah.
close the roads.
Close the roads.
No, but the key thing we want to speak about today is about complacency and about how you do multiple jobs and still maintain that fervour for the procedures, the review that was undertaken on the first time you did the job.
Yep.
And it's how do you do that? How do you get that in your people so they come back and say, well, how are we going to do this? What are the rules? Who's doing what? You know, so that we get a successful outcome like we did the first time we did the job.
Yep. So I think on that, we're also talking about making sure drivers are doing their pre-starts, so they actually know the asset that they're operating
and how high it is. Yeah,
and how high it is, because trucks do have different heights, even for the cab perspective.
That's right.
Knowing your load, but also regular toolbox talks.
Yes.
So like when this situation occurred, we had the management team to come together, and we reflected on the wind turbine situation as well as some of the issues that have happened inside our organisation.
That's right.
To actually reflect. So we're learning from other people's scenarios, but also reflecting on our own
mistakes
on where those mistakes have occurred in the past.
That's right.
And talking about it.
That's right.
And not being silent.
That's right. So it's really it's that as you say, that toolbox situation prior to each time we attempt that task, whatever that task is, to make sure that we don't become complacent, that we go over all the steps that have got to happen in the order to make sure it's successful, whatever the task is.
Yep. And
whether
I think
it's a lift, a transit, whatever. Yeah,
and exactly right. As you said, we've had situations in our yard where we've been lifting a piece of equipment, and we've done it multiple times, and then all of a sudden, the second last or last lift of the day,
people get slack.
People get slack, get distracted, and incidents occur.
Boom.
So I think finally, I want to add as well is for other road users, when you are around an oversized load, is back off.
Yes.
Give that operator space.
Yes.
In the event that they need to pull up quite fast.
Yes.
Give them space so they can do that. So
and listen to the pilots. Observe what they're telling you. So give them space and be present and be alive to what's going on.
Yep. Awesome.
Okay.
Thanks for the chat.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to our podcast, Rolling Forward.
We love sharing content for the logistics industry, so please also connect with us on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Instagram.